Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us for our first colloquium of 2021 with Dr. Eric Landrum. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that UBC's Vancouver Point Grey campus is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and ceded territory of the Musqueam people. I'd also like to acknowledge that you're joining us today from many places, near and far, and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. It is with great excitement that we have Dr. Eric Landrum joining us today. Eric is a professor of psychology and chair of psychology at Boise State University. Eric received his PhD in cognitive psychology, and over his career, he's shown a keen interest in understanding the conditions that promote student success, and he's had a couple of flurries into the relationship between caffeine use and undergraduate students, which I'm sure is a talk of its own. Not only has Eric published widely on what relates to educational success with over 400 presentations, multiple dozens of published books and chapters, over 85 peer-reviewed publications, he's also one of the inaugural co-editors of the APA Journal, the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning in Psychology, and he served as the president for the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. He was a charter member of the Association for Psychological Science, for which he became a fellow in 2018. 2012, Eric served on the Board of Educational Affairs Task Force on Psychology Major Competencies, which was charged with revising the APA guidelines for the undergraduate psychology major. While Eric has a prolific and successful research agenda, much of the fruit in Eric's labor and devotion to the field can be found in the 13,000 students who has passed through his hands over his illustrious career. Eric's dedication to his students, their academic success, and the field of psychology has earned him an APA Presidential Citation in 2014, and in 2019, the American Psychological Foundation's Charles L. Brewer Distinguished Teaching of Psychology Award. This is the highest award given to teachers of psychology in America. It is thus with great pleasure and admiration that I welcome Eric to this colloquium, and I'd like to thank him in advance for talking to us today.
Well, Dr. Lalio, thank you very much. And thank you, UBC Psychology, for the invitation. I am thrilled to be with you here today over Zoom. I desperately wish it could be with you in person in Vancouver. Dr. Lalio and I actually started the conversation in 2019 to visit with you in person in 2020. And obviously that couldn't happen due to someone scheduling a pandemic at the same time as my talk was scheduled. And unfortunately, we're doing it over Zoom. And if I can ever be there in person to come and be with you again, I will take up that opportunity immediately. A couple things that I wanted to say before I got started, my housekeeping, I'm going to give away these slides. And so I know it's being recorded and I am absolutely lovely with that, but I will also send Dr. Lalio in the department a file with these slides, so you're welcome to have them. I know you may be posting questions in the chat, which I will not be monitoring, but we have a nice amount of time to be able to talk afterwards. But if you really want to ask questions during, I would encourage you to either send it in chat and say, this is an urgent question that I must ask right now. Or if you have the ability, you can just unmute and ask it, because that'll give me a chance to do the old man thing where I get a chance to think about the response or take a swig of water and we get a chance to interact with one another. Again, I'm just really happy to be here with you virtually and get a chance to chat with you. So some of these slides, I should warn you that I have actually prepared for people who aren't here with us, so they kind of have a full context. So I'm not going to read every slide to you. I kind of just want to give you that background. So, when speakers are asked to do these things 8 or 9 months in advance, they're asked for an abstract. And this is almost a description of what I'm going to talk about. So it's somewhat truth in advertising. So this is kind of where we're headed today. So what do we know about post-baccalaureate pathways for psychology majors? Psychology majors tend to fall into one of these 3 buckets. And by the way, I looked very hard at, I'm very familiar with American data, and I looked very hard for the Canadian counterpart data. There's one place that I'm going to talk specifically about Canadian data in this talk. I think Many of these principles generalize, not all of them actually. And so I'm going to always try to be fair with that data when I do this. So I do think this one does generalize. I would suspect that Canadian baccalaureates in psychology, as well as American, when they graduate with their bachelor's degree, will follow into one of these three pathways or buckets, if you will. Some of them will go on to graduate schools in psychology programs, psychology disciplines. Some will go to graduate professional schools, but not in psychology. What might that be? Medical school, law school, dental school, veterinary school, occupational therapy, physical therapy, physician's assistant, a wide range of things that are graduate professional, more education, but not in psychology. Third bucket is the psychology workforce. That gets called a lot of different names. There's one label I don't care for. I'm going to show it to you, but I'm not going to use it, kind of thing. It's not a curse word, but actually maybe it is. It kind of is to me, but I don't like using it. So to be fair, this is data from the American Psychological Association about US majors. So these data are not going to apply to the Canadian side of this equation. Those three buckets are parallel with what's that band, that blue band at the top of this screen. They were able to do an estimation study based on National Science Foundation data where they identified, I believe it's in 2017, an estimation of 3.5 million psychology majors in the US. And those three buckets, again, are parallel. They identified 14% of bachelor's degree holders in the US went on for a master's or doctorate in psychology. The middle bucket, 30% went on for a graduate or professional degree with their bachelor's in the US. And then there's that third bucket. And I'm going to actually show you that more closely. I don't care for their description, which you can see my new labeling. In that box, they call it 56% did not obtain higher degrees. I don't care for that labeling. I don't think of people who got their bachelor's degree in psychology as not achieving something. Actually, if you actually look at the data, those who are privileged and able to finish and complete their bachelor's degree, that's quite an accomplishment. So I'm not going to use not language there. I talk about those folks as the psychology workforce, the majority. In the US, that's 56%. I want to be honest with you here. I looked far and wide for the Canadian equivalents. I looked through not only the UBC website, in case someone might have slipped it into a presentation they've made at a conference. I looked at the Canadian Psychological Association for that comparable data. I actually spent a great deal of time. That data, the comparable data for Canada might be out there. I just want to be fair and tell you I couldn't find it. So please don't think, oh my gosh, another lazy American who can't talk about Canadian stuff. He might be a lazy American, but he really tried to find the Canadian data. So in fact, I would love to know either during or after this talk, if someone actually has the Canadian data, it would be fantastic to know about. APA in the US actually only started doing this in 2015 with any reliability. Before that, you had to stitch it together and do some mathematics, almost like degrees of freedom, n minus this to get to that. And they were always estimates. And these are estimates too, anyway. So to be fair, and don't get upset yet because it's not what you think it is. This would be helpful to know, right? What are the top 10 occupations in the US or Canada, or maybe let's go broad, North America, right? So I show you this blank slide to build excitement, right? So this would be good for students to know, undergraduate students. This would be good for advisors and mentors to know. This would be good for parents of those students to know, right? Loved ones, family members, legislators to know. That would be kind of nice. And so I show this slide when I give talks to kind of build excitement for I click through, right? And I'm going to click on the mouse and show you the next slide and do the reveal. And we're not together, so you're not going to be able to see me click on the mouse, right? So I'm going to say it for you. And here we go. Click. I actually did change slides. I know you can't tell. When you see the slide deck someday, you'll see 2 blank slides back to back. Here's the thing. We don't know. We know that psychology is one of the most popular majors in the US. And by the way, I did find data that showed that psychology is one of the most popular majors in Canada. It's reliably first or second, oftentimes second behind business, quite honestly, in Canada is what I read. So it's interesting and perhaps a little troubling that we know it's popular. We know we have a lot of graduates in both countries. Lots of faculty. I believe on the UBC psychology website, I saw 88 faculty. Impressive. But yet we don't know what people do with their bachelor's degree in psychology, not even a top 10 list. So that's a bit troubling. So what you will find in places, you will find lists like this. Now that's blurry on purpose, that you're not having a vision issue. I used to show lists like this when I went to conferences, and I've put this slide in WITSEC, witness protection, because I think it's misleading, because this is a complicated issue that I feel like I'm a commercial on NBC. The more you know, this is a complicated issue I want to talk to you about. I can show you this list and it might make you feel better, but I think that's a false sense because again, it's a complicated issue for psychology majors who enter the psychology workforce. So let's talk about it. I'm going to give you a moment to read that. This is the challenge. So maybe some of you have heard from parents, family, loved ones, legislators, you can't do anything with a psychology degree. First off, that's patently wrong. That's false. That's what in the US we've been calling for the past 4 years. We have a label for that's called fake news, if you understand that reference. It's complicated. It's easy to put on a hat or a t-shirt. You can't do anything with your psych major. This is nuanced. This takes some thought. There are lots of great jobs for people with a bachelor's degree in psychology. What happens is that those great jobs are oftentimes great jobs for someone with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, a bachelor's degree in sociology or social work, or gender studies, or sometimes anthropology. And depending on the job, it might be someone with a bachelor's degree in English or material science, depending on the job. The trouble, the trick, the conflict is that a bachelor's degree in psychology does not uniquely qualify you for something that you and only you can do. Whereas a doctoral degree in clinical psychology, that gets you a job that oftentimes only a clinical PhD can do, which makes it very competitive, but also very lucrative. So that the psychology bachelor's degree is a double-edged sword in many ways. It's so versatile, I can do anything, but it's so confusing to the student who can do it. I can do anything, so I don't know what to do when I graduate. That's the beauty and the difficulty. And so psychology majors, if they're not thinking ahead about their future, if they're not planning from freshman, sophomore year, are going to have a really difficult time. So when I teach a capstone course at Boise State, meant for second to last semester students, I see this all the time. Students have their nose to the grindstone. They're working really hard. They might have jobs, they're commuting to campus. They don't live on campus. They're non-residential. And they get to their senior year and they haven't really thought about their future. They're just trying to get through the day, especially during a pandemic. And they get to their senior year, their last class, and they panic. And I get it, because they haven't thought about their future. And you can't just decide to go to graduate school in May and start in August. That's pretty rare. So I think we, faculty members, staff members, we have to help students think about this. We need tools. We need more tools and strategies, ideally data-driven strategies or data-informed strategies to do that. So that's kind of what today's talk is about. You know, these first 5 majors I have on the list, although it's not maybe as straightforward, those folks know, and society kind of knows what you're going to do. You're a nursing major, you kind of know what you're going to do, and it's comforting. And you don't have a hard time explaining it to people. And, you know, if you're an accounting major, people don't come up to you and go, you can't get a job as an accountant. You're never going to get a job. But how many times have psychology majors had someone come up to you and say, you can't do anything with that degree, and question you or tease you or make fun of you? So that symbol there, you may not be able to see it depending on what kind of screen you're looking at home. That is an asterisk. That's Shift 8 on your keyboard for those of you playing the home game, meaning it's a wild card in a Boolean search. When you're in Psych Info, it's a wild card. It means anything, everything. Again, the double-edged sword, a blessing and a curse. That's what makes this so difficult. That's what makes advising so important. That's what makes some of the data that we have available, even from APA, American Psychological Association, that's what makes it, although I'm grateful for the data we have, I'm also perturbed by some of the data that we have, which really is kind of awful, right? You know, I should be thankful, but I can also be perturbed that we don't have better data. So I want to show you why. So I'm giving you screenshots because I want to give credit where credit is due. What can you do with a psychology degree? A great question to ask, by the way. And you can even dial up, as you can see on your screen, the year of the data and also the level of degree. So I chose bachelor's degree. All right. And you get a word cloud. And I don't know how familiar you are with word clouds, but in a word cloud, the size of the word is representative of the data behind it. So the larger the word, the more people who in their database have that job. Now, I want to be precise with you because this matters. It's not necessarily job, it's job category or occupational category. And that nuance is going to matter because remember, this is complicated and nuanced and complex. So if you were to contact someone at the American Psychological Association and ask them, do you know what kind of jobs people get with their bachelor's degree in psychology? They would say yes. They would say yes. And gently, politely, respectfully, they're wrong because they really don't know. And on the one hand, I'm really glad of all the work they do. They're doing more work than anyone I know of in North America, to my knowledge. So I'm very glad for what they invest in what they do, but they're not helping in some ways. I'm going to show you why I say that. And I say that respectfully. So you get that. Well, there's data behind that. So why are words like social worker bigger than words like economists? Well, there's data behind that. So if you dig around and you click through, first off, cool, we get some, you know, pie graphs about where people work and sectors and licensing. That could be useful, I suppose. In kind of a 30,000 foot view in advising. All right, cool. But then here's the actual data that feeds into that table when those tables are made live on that website. And I don't know how many people we've lost, but for the 66 of you with us, thank you for sticking around. I'm really glad that you're here. So here's the data. And I'm interested in that first row, that bachelor's degree, because that's what we're talking about today. You might be interested, by the way, if you're a doc student in that doctoral degree, or if you're in a master's program, you can check that out. Again, it's not Canadian data though. And I don't even want to make the leap that the patterns in the US are the same as the patterns in Canada, because I don't know that. Who knows? But the master's degree column is what I'm interested in, because when you really keep digging, when you really keep digging, here are the top 10 jobs with a bachelor's degree in the US. And when you really look at the data that the American Psychological Association presents, the #1 job with a bachelor's degree in the US is, wow, sound effects, how about that? Is other administrative. Now, I know when I talk to little kids at the playground, back in the olden days when kids were at the playground. In fact, I met Dr. Lalio's little one, 15-month-old, earlier today. And some of the words that that child said is other administrative. You know, when they're talking about what they want to be when they grow up, we oftentimes hear people talk about the desire to be record clerks and telephone operators. So I appreciate what we know about what you can do with a bachelor's degree in psychology, but other management related occupations is not going to help me as an advisor. We need to know more. I have this kind of naive belief that Canada does everything better than the United States. So I'm hoping somewhere that there is a nice tidy list where some researcher has done it well, and that Canada has a top 10 list of the most common occupations for people holding a bachelor's degree in Canada. I really do hope that. But other marketing and sales occupations doesn't tell me anything about. It tells me very little. Let me be fair. It tells me very little. No one grows up wanting to be other. We need to know more. So I'm going to modify this and make it a challenge. Ta-da! Welcome, Canada, to what we don't know. And if I'm wrong, I will be happy and thrilled to correct this slide and add the Canada top 10 and take out US and say, see, Canada can do it. Why can't the US do it? Canada's doing it. Anyway, the one thing, so I wanted to share with you the data that I was able to find, the data I was able to find. I think one of the things that I think Canada can leverage is that the graduate system, at least to me as an outsider, appears less complex. Maybe it's just a function of size. In the US and departments of psychology, there's close to 500 departments of psychology that offer master's and doctoral level degrees. And in Canada, there's 56 currently. I actually was able to find that and document it. Here I've got it broken out by province, and I can just show you this really quickly and then kind of give you a conclusion that I drew. And then we can, I hope, if I'm getting it wrong, we should talk about it. So I've got 3 here, I've got a couple here. Ontario, very popular. A couple others. I think there's one more. Oh, sorry, I went too fast. And so, and again, y'all live there. I don't, but kind of from my perspective, students who are in Canada who want to stay in Canada, in some ways, their decisions are easier, but yet more complicated at the same time. So if you want to stay, okay, you've got one of 56 if you want to stay in Canada. If you can go anywhere or want to go anywhere, then the world's your oyster, right? However, I did not take a deeper dive into those 56 departments and what specialties they offer. So in some ways, your decision of where to go is easier because there's fewer choices, but the competition for the actual openings actually may be more keen. It may be more difficult because overall, there might be fewer specialty programs in the area you're interested in because it's a smaller pool of opportunities. Then the conversation I have with students at Boise State University, undergraduates all the time, and some students have this in their life, some students don't, is, are you landlocked? Meaning, do you have to stay in the area? Or let me take that back. do you choose to stay? And a lot of students who are in Boise, Idaho need to stay. They have a spouse who has a great job. They're taking care of an older family member. They have children who are in fantastic schools, and they just don't want to uproot and go. They have great family support. So that limits, the perimeter where they draw on a map of where they want to go. So there's lots of things. They want to do in-state tuition, so it's cheaper. I don't know how that works in Canada, if there's a discount for staying in the province or in the area. So it's complicated. I think it's going to be complicated no matter where you live. So students who are in this audience, be sure that you talk to that mentor, that trusted advisor. I actually recommend you talk to more than one and get multiple opinions and talk to folks, and talk early and talk often to folks, because your preferences may change, opinions may change, conditions may change. The graduate admissions criteria under COVID have changed. Many departments that once required the GRE are now waiving the GRE, for example. The thing that I will tell you that I've heard about from some of my students applying is that some departments of psychology are telling students, we don't require the GRE, but you should send it if you have, you can send it if you have it. I hate that. That is awful, because now you're just making the student guess, should I send it or not? Graduate department should send a clear signal. Don't make someone guess on the other end. It's stressful enough as it is. Don't make them guess. I have some hypotheses why they do that, and I don't like them. You can ask me about that in the Q&A if you want to. I'd be happy to share. I'm not usually bashful. All right. How are we doing so far? Anybody have a burning question that they have to ask now, or else they're going to explode?
Well, I was just wondering, actually, Eric, it's Catherine, about the 56 or so programs within Canada is kind of interesting. We at UBC, we're R1 school. And so when we're looking at other R1s in Canada, that if students are coming out with the expectation from our program of going to another R1, that is not 56 options to look at. Right. That's much fewer. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on kind of advising for that kind of like changing tiers, R1, R2. I don't know if you've got.
Well, I think if you are advising your students for an R1 level experience, then my opinion would be you're advising them for everything, because an R2 is, how do I say this properly? An R2 program is a program that probably has lesser aspirations, right? It has a lower number of master's and doctoral students that it's cranking out. It has a lower institutional research productivity in terms of dollars and federal and grant dollars. I mean, the R1 is the upper echelon of research institutions in North America. I mean, there's nothing higher than an R1. So if you're prepping your undergraduates to be competitive at your own R1 or any R1, and they decide, I want to go to an R2, or I want to go to, I want to take a year off and then go do something else at some different type of program, I think they're getting the best prep they can to be successful in their application for graduate school. I mean, don't you think so? Or are you seeing that maybe students aren't having that success?
Oh, no, I was thinking of it more like helping students see that there are other options. Like I think advising for fellow R1s is fine and useful. But kind of opening up, I think that students feel like it's a failure if they don't go to an R1 is really the heart of what I'm getting at, actually.
Gotcha. Okay. I think I don't, Yeah. Okay. I think I know where you're going, and I don't know who I'm going to offend. Oftentimes, R1 faculty want to create R1 students in their own image, and they're disappointed when an R1 graduate student doesn't decide that they want to do research for the rest of their entire life. And they might decide that they want to do teaching, or they want a balance of teaching and research, or they, UBC undergraduate who wants to go in R1, and I don't know the R1 schools, but I'm going to guess University of Toronto is an R1. So UBC undergraduate, great student, gets into University of Toronto. University of Toronto faculty member expects them to be prepped for an R1 experience. Student gets to U of T, and then that student all of a sudden is a competent researcher, but also shows an interest in teaching. But now that U of T faculty member starts to deride that student for expressing something other, they want to breathe something other than research air. And sadly, I can tell you from in the States, that happens all the time. I hear students tell me all the time, I get criticized for putting effort into teaching, and that every minute spent teaching is a time spent away from the lab. So, however, not only is it a great question, but I have no idea how to solve that, because I personally, I've never lived in the graduate school world. My entire career has been in an undergraduate department of psychology.
Totally fair. Yeah, I would just, I'm going to keep percolating kind of advice to undergrad slant on that idea. Yeah, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, it's not an interruption at all. It's I think it's hard for undergraduates who want to go on to graduate school, and even those that get in, to know what they really want to do when they're done with graduate school, and then to know how to get the experiences while they're there. I got a chance to speak earlier today with 3 absolutely delightful graduate students in your program. And I'm not doing that thing where you just say the nice thing because you're the guest. I mean, we had a great conversation, and they were delightful. And we talked about, do you want to go to the industry path or the academic path? And we had a legitimate conversation about it. And, if you want to go to the industry path, you might not spend a lot of time teaching, or if you do, the teaching might be great prep for training in an HR training environment. And so, the thing I tell students about getting a master's or a doctorate, they're just different levels of a Swiss Army knife. And if you get the great skill set of master's or doctoral training done well, that Swiss Army knife will serve you for a long, long time. And you might go into academia for a while, and then you might switch out and go into industry, or you might go into industry for a while and then re-enter higher ed. I mean, the more education you have, the more educational attainment, typically speaking, the greater variety you have in job selection and job availability in your career. So I don't know if that answered it, but it's a great conversation to have and continue, because that's really important. So thank you. Really important. So I want to I want to be generous. Who, me? Yeah, I know. Weird. So I've been studying and talking about what people do with their undergraduate degree and how they can be successful students for a long time. And it's kind of motivated the thing that I really want to talk to you about today, and then have a chance to talk more about in our discussion. I've developed what I'm hoping is a decision aid that helps students think about, am I ready or not to go to graduate school? Not if I should go or not, that's none of my business. But am I ready or not to go? Am I ready to apply? And if I'm not, what do I need to think about? And so when I look back at the literature and the lists I'm about to share with you, and again, these are in the slides, which you're welcome to have. These are my warnings. These are my caveats. I'm going to give you a list of reference citations. I'm telling you they're not necessarily complete because I assembled these quickly. Some of them are in 6th edition APA format and some of them are 7th. So if you're grading, I'm not going to get a perfect score. Let's see, I did learn a lot about the grading scale at UBC. I don't want to comment on where I'm going to fall there, but I'm not going to do well. And my categorizations are arbitrary, and I put a reference citation into one category where sometimes authors talk about more than one thing. But there's a reason why I'm doing this. Hopefully you'll see it. If not, you can ask me about it. So when I look at the literature on students thinking about the buckets, going to graduate school, going to schools outside of psychology, and the psychology workforce path, here's what I see. The biggest one by far, the one that's gotten the most experience, is the applying to graduate school literature. And for me, the obvious reason is faculty study what they know. Almost every faculty member went to graduate school. So we write about that. We do research about that. Quite honestly, we need more faculty members writing about industry and getting jobs there and working there and writing those books for undergraduates. This is screen one of that. This is the second screen of it. By far and away, when materials are created, books, journal articles, this is, in my estimation, the most popular area. Lots of resources. Some of these are way out of date. Some of them are very current. And this is something that kind of needs to be updated. Trends do change over time. Again, I'm just trying to give you the background. I'm setting the stage, painting a picture. I'm assembling the stage for the play. I don't know. You pick whatever you want. There are databases. Yes, these are the US databases. I'm sorry, I looked, and maybe there are Canadian databases that you can search where it'll tell you how many applicants across all Canadian universities were in developmental, social, biopsych, learning, cognition. I know where to find those in the US. I looked for them in Canada. I could not find them. So if someone can point them to me after this, I would be grateful. But I wanted to show you where I know of some of them. There are studies that look at the demographic trends. So who's been applying over time, men and women, different ethnic minority, financial status, first gen status. So there are demographic studies done about entering the workforce as well as applying to graduate school, barriers. There's a classic on there by Jane Hallinan who got questioned when she was in Florida about, are there too many psychology majors? She had to write a white paper to the legislators in Florida about defending why psychology major programs for undergraduates should continue. Because, by the way, a couple of years later, the same argument was made in Texas, in the US. You might remember, maybe you don't, maybe you were shielded from that. Jeb Bush in Florida a couple of years later made a comment about, well, psych majors, all they do is undergraduates work at Chick-fil-A. So if you want to check that out, you've got the URL to look at that as well. There's been some work, not enough, about the employment path. The idea here is that I'm just kind of telling you what's been done, giving you a snapshot of what's current, what's not. And I'm going to draw some conclusions here in a minute. This last one, and I didn't want to split this across two screens, so why it's smaller. This is the one I want to kind of focus on the remaining time that I'm going to talk before we get to talk together. Thinking and planning for the future. This is the one where I think that we as a discipline need more emphasis. We need more resources. We need to help our students have a framework to think about it. Obviously, I don't want to make the decisions. That's a hugely personal thing. But we need more resources and tools and decision aids to help students have a way of thinking about, should I go to graduate school? What are the things I haven't thought of yet? What decisions do I have to make? Do I have to make them in a certain sequence? Do I have to decide now? Can I decide later? What do I know? What do I not know? And what do I know I don't know? Kind of thing. And so some of these are current, some of these are classic, and many of these have inspired what I'm about to show you in a couple of minutes. Just kind of some takeaways from these. And again, this is the beauty of giving you these slides. You can have them and look at them carefully. I do think and again, this is a really informal division on my part. Your results may vary if you were to look at it and sort by like this. Some of those areas are dominated by books and book chapters, and some of them are really nicely supported with more empirical journal articles. And the thing that you should know about books and book chapters is that oftentimes those are just people's opinions. Those aren't data informed or evidence-based. So you have to be careful there sometimes. Some of these areas have been studied for decades. These aren't new ideas, but some of them really need constant updating. You can't really trust graduate admissions data from 2004. Trends have changed. For example, what about the effect of social media in 2021 as opposed to 2004? I think there's a differential value in what I just showed you between students and faculty. Students might look at what I just showed you and go, gee, what boring slides, a bunch of text and a bunch of references. Faculty who are interested in this area are going, oh my God, look what he just gave us. It's awesome. He just gave us all these references and citations. I can just click and copy and paste the URL. So for some of you, it's like, what a waste. For others of you, thanks for the gift. And however you feel about it is fine. Finally, I think there should be more tools available. I'm going to show you the idea I've been working on for 3 years. And I don't think it should be the only thing that should be in development. I hope other people are developing other ideas. I think that tools like the one I'm about to share with you should be like car buying tools like we see on TV, or insurance purchasing tools, not insurance options, but the tools that we see to help us buy insurance. You know, all the tools that we see on TV, compare 7 insurance things at one time, or compare your car against other cars in the area, or Zillow or whatever. You know, look at your house in the neighborhood. We need lots of tools to let students pick the tool that works for them. This is not a place for a monopoly. This is a place for free market and a ton of tools. Anyway, those are my observations for what it's worth. So if you're a Star Wars fan, don't be offended by this. This is my subtitle of this last little section of this talk, A New Hope. All right. So I'll let you read those. This is what I've been interested in for a long, long time, but specifically been working on for the past 3 years. How do students think about and make decisions about whether or not to attend? Not whether or not they should go, none of my business. What decision processes do they use? And what decision aids could be helpful to them? So I'm going to show you some stuff. Oh, I have to give some acknowledgements. I'm sorry. So these 3 students over the past 3 years in different ways, different amounts of time, have been really instrumental. Ashlyn Arbuckle, Tammy Tang Wilson, and Miriam Larage. And so I just want to acknowledge those 3 undergraduates who've been my research assistants, different times and levels over the 3 years. When this project goes live, they will be credited. They will all be credited. So, all right. I was going to say, don't laugh, but you know what? Laugh if you want to. I'm going to show you some goofy stuff that's kind of, I don't even want to say it's in beta. I'm going to say it's an alpha. All right. We've been working on developing a game. It's not an app, it's a game. And after looking at the literature for so long and looking at those reference citations as well as others that are not psychology specific, we've identified kind of 4 areas that you can look at when you look across all the literature, and they're in those 4 color-coded columns. When people have tried to do this before and develop questions, when they look at the literature of how people make decisions or not, if they're successful or not in their applications to graduate school, they have these 4 areas. People make a decision to go to graduate school or not. Do they know how to apply, which influences their decision to apply or not? Are they prepared to succeed? Do they have the tools, the knowledge? And are they personally prepared? Do they have the support systems in their life to make a move to wherever they want to go? So with those 3 students, over the past 3 years, we've been looking at the literature. We've been extracting evidence-informed facts that we have sorted into those 4 categories. Call it a Q sort, call it a visual exploratory factor analysis. You can call it whatever you want. And we're literally making a card game where on one side, you read a prompt, you flip the card over, you read 3 possible answers, you answer the best that you can, and you put it in one of the 3 piles within the color. And you do that about 125 times for 125 cards. And by the way, it's a 1-person game. It's not, maybe it's not even really a game. It's really self-exploration. It's really self-reflection. It's a way for a student to systematically work through the complicated, nuanced set of questions that one has to think about. And at the end of the game, you look at the piles. And the idea would be, a student might get some insight. I really do know how to apply because the ready stack is tall in orange. Am I prepared to succeed? Well, the need more information stack might be really tall there. It doesn't say don't go to grad school, but it might say need more information. The decision to go pile might be really super tall. The personally prepared, it might be even across. So again, by answering these questions in a systematic format, the notion would be at the end of the game, the student could look at the piles, pick up the cards again and figure out, am I ready? Am I not ready? Or do I need more information? So I want to show you a couple more things, and then I'm ready to chat with you. So we've been extracting from the literature these things. And by the way, these are really hard to write. And Miriam is my RA right now, the last person who was listed there. And she and I are doing this together in a Google Sheet, and they take so long to write. So you can see the original stem in the first column. These are blue. And then how we rewrote it is the 5th column. And then we're trying to write, it's turned into fill in the blank. And so you can see we're trying to figure out what gets in the blank and then a little description about what we mean. So what does ready look like? What does not ready look like? And what does need more information look like? And so we've actually already found the vendor. We're literally going to print these cards, the card deck. We're literally going to print that board on a little vinyl board that's going to have the same consistency as a twister board, fold up plastic. And we're going to ask colleagues around the country, maybe a couple at UBC, will you play this game with some students? Will you let them play? Maybe have a psychi event, maybe have a psychology club event and let some students play this game and give us some feedback. Does it make sense? Are the cards too confusing? Is the board too dumb? I mean, by the way, this is not a profit thing. If we ever have to charge money, I'll be break even. I doubt if we'll make any money. I'm the world's worst business person, just by the way. So it's not a money thing. It's can we develop some decision tools that will help students think about this very complex issue again, it's not should I go or not, is am I ready or not? So anyway, I want to wrap this up really quickly so we can talk. So here's one. I want to show you another one. Here's another category about internships. And again, I'm giving you the slides so you can dive into this more. And then here's another one. I think it's about financial aid. Yeah, paying back loans. And again, over all the literature, we had about 150 questions. After duplicates, I think we're down to about 125, and it's just taking an inordinate amount of time. If any of you have ever written multiple choice test item files for a publisher for a living, it's kind of like that. It just takes a long time to write really good ones. So that's what we're doing. That's the story. That's where we're headed. That's what I think is what's next. I don't think this is the solution to everything. I think this is one decision aid that should be among many. This is kind of old school. It's going to be like, they're going to be the size of like tarot cards, and you physically place them on a board because you want to be able to see the piles. And maybe you go off and do some exploration, and then you redo your piles. And again, the board doesn't tell you what to do. The board is a way, the game is a way to help you think through maybe some things you hadn't even thought about. I mean, there'll be some questions in there about daycare, and maybe there'll be a pile of that topics that are not applicable because I don't have kids. But, you know, if you have kids and you're going to go to grad school, maybe daycare might be something you should think about. So I think that's where I had planned to stop. Let's just take a quick look. Yep. And by the way, at the end of this, when we're done, I'm going to actually, let me show you that for a minute in case you're worried about it. And then I'll flip back, or actually I would rather get out of screen share. So we might see each other in little squares if that's your choice. That's my email if you want to email me, and that's my Twitter handle. I haven't been on Twitter a lot, I'll just be honest with you. I need to get back on. So if you want the slides, I am going to share them with Dr. Lalio, or you could email me. By the way, the department's welcome to put them on YouTube next to the link for the video if you want to. You can distribute any way you would like that's convenient for students.
Well, thank you very much. I will do a virtual version of a hand clap for you, Eric. Thank you very much for that insightful talk and some really exciting stuff coming out your way. If, you know, being the host, I have the power to be this rude and come up with the first question, if I may. And please, if you do have a question, either you can post your question or your name in the chat, and then I'll call upon you, and you're welcome to ask your question then. When you say you're developing this game and for people to consider these things, does the literature sort of have like a sweet spot in terms of where a student might be in their university career as to when they start thinking about this? I imagine that the cards and playing the game will look very different in their first year compared to when they are closer to the time. Is there a sweet spot, or is this just something that you play over and over again?
That is a great question. And the answer is the literature doesn't have any indication. However, I have spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I've spoken to a lot of people who share the same passion with me. And the first analogy that I held for a long time that makes sense is a critical window. So think about a student's trajectory over time in their undergraduate career. And let's say that we're trying to deliver career relevant information to them that they will soak up and hear and act on. Get active and involved outside the classroom. Get involved in a high impact practice like TA, RA, internship, connect with a faculty member, mentor, all the things that we want all students to do. So I first started thinking about this as, and I'm not a developmentalist, sadly, but I first started thinking about this as a critical window, like a developmental window. And we have a mandatory 2-credit pass-fail course at the 100 level right after our Psych 100, which hits freshman second semester and every transfer student, that I think actually rarely hits the developmental window, the critical window. So the challenge becomes what you asked, Simon, is that if we have this information, or even if we had this game, what would be the ideal way to play it? Or when would be the ideal time to play it? Because if you played it as a freshman, a lot of the answers would be not ready or need more information. If you play it as a senior, it might be too late. It's hard to know when, and the game outcomes might change over time. But the more I gave talks about this over my career, because I have been harping on this for a while, someone talked me into, it's not a critical window analogy. And I'm a little bit out of my league here. It's a Vygotsky's zone of proximal development analogy. So it's about developing into being ready to think about this. It's not about a window that opens and closes. It's about being ready to think about it and be a receptacle for it. And the thing is, I don't know what the indicator of that is. Now, I've talked to my colleagues about this. So, maybe we should have a module in every class that's available in the LMS that says, here's the careers module, and the faculty member doesn't have to prepare it. It's a departmental thing. And you drop it in every class. And we fear that's going to be mind-numbingly boring to every student who gets it in every class. So how do you deliver something in a way that's meaningful to the student at the time they're ready for it? And I don't know how to do that.
Thank you very much.
So if one of the world-class psychologists in this department could help me with that, please just go ahead and unmute and let me know.
Well, in the meantime, Darko, you said you had a question.
Yep. I am not the person to answer the
call
that you just made, Eric,
I was so hopeful.
But I do have a different question. At the beginning of the talk, you spoke quite a bit about the kind of missing data problem in the job data especially for the bachelors. And you gave us a lot of comparisons to other areas like accounting or nursing or something like that. I'm wondering if perhaps there's a bit of a misanalogy there, and I'm wondering what we know about the outcomes for bachelors in other more hard sciences, like what do students with physics degrees do, or even other disciplines that are maybe a little bit more like psych in a sense, like economics or political science. How much of the issues that we're seeing in the transfer, in the ultimate job outcome rates for psychology students really have to do with psychology per se, as opposed to the, economic forces that are sort of leading to, if more students get degrees in non-professionally oriented fields, that naturally speaking, the value of that degree for any particular job is lowered.
Right. So first off, it's a great question. I think you framed it nicely. A couple things. First off, I don't want to give the impression that psychology majors aren't employable and don't get great jobs. It's just that we don't have good data about it, good, reliable data. And just because we don't doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to. And I wish that more than just APA would work on this. I wish APS would work on this. I wish PsychI would work on this. And I have pressured every organization that would listen to me to do this and to collaborate. It is a messy, what some of my colleagues call a wicked problem, a messy, wicked problem that is hard to tackle. That doesn't mean that it's not not worth it. So I don't know if we're any better or any worse than any of the allied disciplines that you mentioned, but you did hit on something there at the very end, which is the disciplines around us that have professional undergraduate accreditation. They know exactly what their undergraduates do with their bachelor's degrees, because they're required to know that for their accreditation standards. So social work knows what their undergraduates do, because a part of undergraduate accreditation in social work is the reporting of that. Engineering knows because of their, I was trying to think of the acronym, I'm not going to come up with it. Business knows because of their business accreditation. So our colleagues in every department that has that professional / accreditation standard, they do know.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm actually not sure I really answered your question, but thanks for asking it.
Denny, you have a question.
Hi. So really interesting talk. I'm glad that you took the time to share some data with us about like what job outcomes are. But I kind of want to go back to something that you said, sure, that the purpose of your game was, you know, a question of like not whether or not I should go to grad school, but whether I'm ready or not to go to grad school. Right. And the thing I struggle with as a graduate student mentor to my undergrads is looking at the job outcomes for people like even in my like level of degree. And the fact that there is like a lot of people go to grad school with a very particular goal of being a professor. Usually like if they're at UBC, their goal is to also be a professor at an R1. And so I'm wondering, how do you kind of deal with the, I guess like the irresponsible nature of universities where we're pushing out like hundreds and hundreds of undergrads who may or may not be able to pursue the types of degrees they want to. And we're also pushing out hundreds and hundreds of graduate students and postdoctoral fellows that are probably not going to get the sort of jobs that they've been trained for. And so is really the question, should it still be, should or should I not go to grad school versus am I ready?
It's a great question. And I think the only, I can't speak for others. I really can't. I think we should try to always be fair with the data. And so, and again, I'm sorry, I don't know the Canadian numbers on this, but one of the things that the American Psychological Association is good at is collecting on an annual basis with a little bit of lag, the number of in departments of psychology across the US, the number of applicants per specialty, and the acceptance rate, rejection rate, and the enrollment rates, so that we can tell students, and the number of people who graduate per year, so you can see the throughput. So we can show people who decide, yes, I want to be a professor. We can show them, okay, well, this is the path. And I really ethically don't feel like I can tell someone you shouldn't go to graduate school. Now I'll be honest with you, when they come to me with a 2.7 GPA, I am going to tell them that I have never seen anyone get into graduate school in my 32 years in higher ed with a less than 2.9. So, I mean, I'm going to be fair with the data. But I think we tell them what the odds are to the extent we know them in a data-based way. And then, but we can also tell them, even if you go to grad school and you don't get into higher ed, that Swiss Army knife of skills is pretty impressive. And there's, I know all kinds of people who are part of early career psychologists within professional organizations who actually got a job in higher ed, were very disillusioned, went into industry, and were much happier. Everybody on this screen probably realizes that happiness isn't guaranteed by getting the job you thought you wanted. But that's a hard thing to tell somebody when they've been told since 12, you've got to go to grad school and you got to get a PhD in clinical. And that's all they've organized their life around. Again, I am really good at trying to provide smart sounding answers to questions of which I'm not answering. So, I mean, I know you're struggling with the ethical conundrum of why do we keep accepting people to social psychology programs when 4 jobs in North America open up for a social psychologist a year? We're cranking out 400 social psychology PhDs a year. At least in the last data I saw, and this wavers year to year, social psychology doctoral programs were harder to get into than clinical PhD. Now that wavers, that always has some fluctuation. There's variability, but social psychology programs are getting hugely competitive because it's popular, it's fun, students love it, it's important. But there's way more clinical jobs out there than social psych jobs, that's for sure. Clinical as in clinical, being a clinician, not clinical PhD in departments of psychology.
All right, we have a question in chat over here from Shay Yuan Chong. How does the game that you were talking about, how does it change for jobs graduate school students with multiple marginalized identities, ethnic identity, sexual identity, especially in relation to what Dr. Catherine Rawn spoke about earlier, R1 and R2 universities? What does your data show in terms of ethnic differences, differences in distribution of psych students with multiple marginalizations? Where do they go after graduating with a BA in psychology? And how can these students overcome the marginalizations when applying for grad schools, especially as they look into their potential options?
So the data that are available are probably anecdotal and program by program at best. I'm trying to think of some, if I can think of national studies, like intervention type studies. In the States, we have a program called McNair, and I don't expect any of you to know about it. It's came out of something in Texas 30 years ago, and it's funded by the US government. And it's specifically set up to help undergraduate students who want to go into PhD doctoral programs in all disciplines, but it's specifically targeted for underrepresented, first gen, and low income students. And I can tell you at Boise State, and watching the McNair program in 32 years, and watching many psych students go in, and being a mentor to about, I'm going to say 4 to 5 students in that program, it is tremendously successful. But it is high touch, high impact, moderate expense. There's definitely ways to do it. There's no smoke and mirrors. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes faculty investment. I will also tell you, absolutely worth every minute. I loved working with those students because they were fantastic. But there's no trick. It's like working with any other student. You just have to put in the effort and you get the rewards, both the faculty and the student. But you have to make a concerted effort. You can't just hope. So for example, our McNair program goes out and actively recruits students from those 3 groups that I mentioned. So you can't sit back and be lackadaisical or lazy about it. Because those students oftentimes don't even know the opportunities exist. Or those best and brightest students from low income, first gen, minoritized groups, they're not even thinking about graduate school because no one's ever talked to them about it. Don't even know about the opportunities. So it's on us to be good stewards of that, ambassadors of those opportunities to everybody. So again, I'm really good. I don't think I even answered that question. Can I dodge another question that's a really important one and not answer it?
Well, Kathy, you have your question next.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you for the wonderful talk. I have a question. I know a lot of people ask questions about students in the last year thinking about that. I want to ask about what about students, starting their universities and they still have a choice. They have a choice between different majors. Maybe they're, also interested in some other majors that are more popular in psychology. What kind of advice would you give to them? Also, there are options for like double major, having a minor, right? Like, what about those things? How would that affect?
That's a great question. I think for each individual student right now, as in now, you have to think about, do I enjoy online learning? And am I in a hurry to go to school? Because if you know you don't enjoy online learning, and if you're not in a hurry, I know of students who made a choice. I'm not going to go to school. I'm going to take a purposeful gap year. Now, again, there's some luxury to that. Some people have the luxury. Actually, I know a couple of students who said, I'm going to go get 2 jobs and get jobs and save money so that I can come back to Boise State in the fall when I can do mostly face-to-face, because that's how I do better. I know I do better face-to-face. Some students don't have that luxury. Some students, actually, honestly, some students live on the financial aid, so they need to keep going to school semester to semester. So I think students have to make decisions about what's best for them and their timeline and their educational path. It's not always that easy because there's other things going on about parents putting pressure on finishing in 4, or financial aid concerns, or needing to move back home for whatever reason that might be. You mentioned the minor, and the minor is wildly popular at Boise State. And I'm looking around, I just don't get it. I just don't get it, because I've done the research. I've had students do research with me. There are no data that I know of that show any beneficial effect of having a psychology minor. Trust me, I want to say that there is a benefit. I want to say that employer, all things being equal, someone with a psych minor gets a higher starting salary, or gets a promotion 3 years later. Or of course, I want to say a psychology minor is beneficial. There's no data out there. In the last 25 years, I can find 3 studies about the psychology major. Hey, advanced undergraduate on this Zoom. Hey, graduate student looking for a study to do sometime over the summer. Hey, master's thesis person or undergraduate looking for a thesis project, looking for something that needs to be done. Do a study about the beneficial effects of a psychology minor, because tell you what, it is publishable, because there's been 3 in the past 25 years.
What about with a psych major and minor of something else, like
yeah. The only data I've ever found reliably about the beneficial effects of a minor are foreign language minors. World language, adding a world language minor to almost any major, beneficial effect. In some cases, there's a little bit of data about business minors. But if you're looking for data about the beneficial effect of a minor, I can't find it in psychology. I'm not saying it's not there. I'm saying I can't find it. And I look really hard. I really do. PsycInfo, Google Scholar, Web of Science. I really look hard.
Thank you. Thank you for the answers. More research needed.
Yeah. Tons more research needed.
Great. Thank you.
All right, we have 2 more questions. I'm going to read one out from Mona, and then I'll ask Habiba to read out their question. Mona asks, thank you, Dr. Landrum. Says, thank you, Dr. Landrum, and then asks, I was wondering what advice you have for the students that you described earlier today in their last semester and have no idea what they want to do after graduating. Is it hard to plan for the future? It is hard to plan for the future when feeling overwhelmed with schoolwork and not having a clear vision of what to do.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure to be with all of you today. I've got to go, and see you again next time. You've just asked the hardest question of all. Yeah, I get asked this a lot by students in my own capstone course. Wow. Are we still recording? Okay, good. All right. Fair enough. I just want to know. Thank you, Catherine, for the head nod. When a student gets there, usually second to last semester or last semester, and they have this realization that they've usually committed to graduating. They've got a graduation date. They've paid their graduation fee. They've applied. They've told mom and dad. But then they realize, I'm going to graduate and I don't have 3 references. And even though I've worked really hard and I have a decent GPA, in some ways, I haven't done anything. I mean, I've done a lot. I've been a great student. I worked 2 jobs, took care of my family, was a good person, volunteered when I could. I was a member of Psychi. Didn't go to any meetings, but I was a member because I was busy. And then they get into a capstone course or they run into a professor who tells them all this stuff. The critical window opened, right? And they started listening to stuff they probably heard before, but didn't really hear because they were busy. Now, they weren't lazy. They just didn't hear it. So here's what I tend to say. This is the hardest conversation I have with students these days. And when I used to be face-to-face with students, I always had Kleenex ready because this is the one conversation that if a student was going to cry in my office, and I take no pleasure in this, by the way, these 3 words were going to cause tears. And those 3 words were, extend your stay. When a student gets to that point and they realize they're not going to be competitive for the workforce, they're not going to be competitive for graduate school, that in some ways they've worked really hard, but in other ways they've done nothing. And I'm overgeneralizing there. I will oftentimes say, can you go an extra semester? Can you go an extra year? And I know what I'm saying, which is why it causes tears, because that means more time and more money. And that is a position of privilege to be able to do that, and more student loans and maybe more sacrifices by mom and dad or family. But if you go to college and do all the things for 4 years and you don't leave with what you want and what you came for, how big of a waste of money is that and time? So if you can afford that differential cost of 20% over 5 years for an extra year versus 4 years, and you leave without getting what you want, that's what I will say to people when they are in that spot. Now, sometimes, in fact, a lot of times it'll be like military students and their funding is up and they can't do it. Or they're just in a student's in a spot with their parents where my parents support me going and there's no way in heck they'll do that. And I totally get that. I totally get that. But I have had many students extend their stay. It's not like they would come and tell me I was wrong, but many students have come back to me and said, I hated it when you told me that, but it turned out to be a good decision. That doesn't mean it always is. It just means sometimes it is a good decision.
Thank you very much. If you need to go, feel free to head out. We have one more question. Habiba, would you like to ask your question?
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Landrum, for the great data presentation and presenting all the statistics and doing all the hard work. I guess you've answered, 70% of what I'm going to ask you, but I still want to present you my question.
Sure.
And ask you some advice on what would you say to someone that is myself, I would say, who has decided that they don't want to continue to do the graduate school. I am graduating with a BA, and I do want to move into the industry. So what advice would you give me? Because I've been I'll give you a little bit of context of where this question is coming from. I came to UBC thinking I would do a bachelor's, and then that would sort of decide my career and what I want to do. But when I came to UBC, I realized there are a lot of question marks, and most of the problems were very similar to what you showed the presentation. I couldn't find a good career pathway that I can hook up to and then sort of build my career from there, like comparing myself to an engineer where they do a degree and then, you know, they have a job and they do their work, and they're able to have a decent living. And all this, I guess, thought and doing the analysis and thinking about this, I obviously was not including my passion. I got fascinated by psychology and the content, and I enjoy studying it. I love studying about it, but my passion is not going to earn me money or give me a living. That I know for sure right now with just a BA. I might be underestimating, or I guess I might not be aware of some of the information, but I'm basing my question and on the kind of people I've interacted with and some of the research I've done on my end. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. There's a lot there. So if I miss anything, you'll have to gently remind me. I think your situation is really common. And at least in the US, we know that the majority of students go directly into the psychology workforce. And so that's a really common choice that you have made. And for the majority of students, it's a good choice. And so I don't think, let's put it, you get to feel however you want to feel about it. I would encourage you to not feel remorse about it. If you're leaving with good skills and you can be employed and you feel good about your education, that's something to celebrate. By the way, a lot of people don't get a chance to go to college, and a lot of students who start college don't get to finish college. So those are really things that I would encourage you to celebrate. Now, here, I heard everything you said. I think students with their bachelor's degree and sometimes often don't feel successful in the first job they have with a bachelor's degree in psychology. And I think part of that is the uncertainty of the discipline, not being able to tell you what that job's going to be or what that job typically might be. Even the salary data, and I didn't present that, but in the US, the salary data is highly variable. I mean, starting salaries for the bachelor's degree in the US, depending on the source, these are normally salary surveys, is anywhere from $35,000 a year to $45,000 a year as an average starting salary. And when some people hear that, there's one of two reactions. They either go, that is incredibly low and I'm not going to be able to live that way. Or some people go, you mean I get to have 35,000 whole dollars to myself? I mean, people have, it's either, one end of the spectrum or the other. So, you know what, here's the problem. Here's the challenge. Human beings in some ways love mysteries, but we don't like mysteries about ourselves. I know what you want, because I want the same thing. I want to know how it turns out in the end. I want to peek to the end of the book and see how it ends. So I think your uneasiness is you don't know what that first job's going to be. You don't know if you're going to be happy in it. You don't know if you're going to like it. That teacher, that accountant, that nurse, that social worker kind of know what that first job is going to be. So they kind of have some security, and they don't know exactly, but they can ballpark it pretty well. But psych majors can't. So I think how you're feeling is absolutely legitimate. And, we all want to know how it's going to turn out. And that, by the way, that applies to pretty much everything, right? I want to know how that relationship turned out. I'm married for the second time. I'd kind of like to know how that second marriage turns out, right? We want to know how that class turns out when we start it. So I think whatever you're feeling, whether it's anxiety or uneasiness, perfectly legitimate. I think I can say with some confidence that for most people, it turns out really well. If you look at the national data in the US, I didn't show this graph today, from 1949, 50 till now, the jump in the number of people getting bachelor's degrees in psychology has had a tremendous increase over the past 70 years. And if people weren't being successful with their bachelor's degrees, people wouldn't still be getting that education. But there's some uncertainty for you. I get it. I respect it. I doubt if I answered that question. You even asked me a 30% question. I doubt if I even answered that 30%.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eric.
You're welcome.
I guess I did got some insight into what you were trying to, I guess, propose. But is there any data that we as students can look and see personal, like, I guess, trajectories of those people who did major in psychology and what they ended up doing? Like, because like if I Google that, what does a psychology major do? Like in the start, you showed those cloud bubbles and sales and marketing and HR and administration. But when I do this research, these are goals that people might have, right? Like 10 years down the lane, they might be an HR person, or maybe 5 years into their career, not right after, in the first 2-3 years. So I'm trying to figure out that puzzle, like what to do right after I graduate. And yeah.
Though I guess maybe the one recommendation that I would make that maybe you've already pursued, I would suspect that you have a career services or a career center on your campus. And oftentimes they can help with the support services for those students getting ready to graduate. And sometimes, and I don't know if yours has this, they will cooperate with your alumni office, and they can tell you what the UBC psychology alumni who went into the workforce, what their first jobs were. So it might not be Canadian national data, but it might be local data, which quite honestly could be more valuable than a national Canadian survey of what people did. I just did this.
I'm gonna have to interrupt there. Unfortunately, we're out of time at the moment. And I know that you've been talking straight since 9 a.m. this morning, which is an impressive feat. And we've got another couple hours of meetings head up. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to cut short, but that was fascinating. It really got the sense of what we were talking about earlier, how you said we could call you Uncle Eric. Feels like we've got that sense going now. So thank you very much. This is fascinating, and we really appreciate your time and sharing all your hard work and research with us.
Yeah, check out the Career Center. Yeah.
Thank you very much.